When it comes to miniatures, they are one of the least important parts of running a game, but also something we as DMs care about a lot. By itself, no player will refuse a game simply because there are no miniatures. I mean, it's more fun if there are some, but tabletop games or tabletop RPGs are games of the mind. It's completely possible to run certain fights without minis. But minis do help in keeping track of things, especially with showing players where certain things are. Shorter fights or brawls can easily be played out in every player's head, but for fights with multiple people and enemies, it's probably worth it to put some more effort into preparing these, or at least making up a battle map in the moment. It doesn't have to be anything special. You can just use a sheet of paper and move the minis along the sheet, and that's gonna be fine. For special terrain, you also don't need anything in particular. You can either scribble that on the paper or use materials you have lying around. Oh look, that's a wall! It's obviously more stunning if you have a proper battle map and some 3D terrain, but as I said, no player will be upset about it. In line with that, you also don't have to use minis. You can use whatever you have lying around. The game is still about imagining things. So I can still imagine that this aircraft carrier is a goblin. And I mean, that can also lead to some fun moments where a barbarian screams that they just cut down an aircraft carrier with their wimpy battle axe. It's more fun in a way to play these things out in your mind, substituting characters with objects. For the enemies, it's also nice to use sweets or food instead of minis. Whoever kills the character can eat a gummy bear and have a treat. It's nice to simplify things like that. The less pieces you use, the more your players need to imagine things, and that can be fun. It's harder to imagine this bear to be a dragon than it is for you to imagine this aircraft carrier to be a dragon, because this mini is already painted and it does look like a bear. Like a black bear. But this aircraft carrier, it doesn't make sense to be in this game. It's obviously a goblin, or dragon, or dog, or an orc. All of this doesn't mean that it's bad to substitute or use proper minis, it's just different. For the player characters, one thing I found fun is to use Legos. That way the player can customize their character, and there's still this imaginary fun that Darth Vader just revived Dobby the Elf. If you want to use minis but are on a tight budget, because these pieces of plastic junk are honestly extremely expensive, you can use paper cutouts. You can make them yourself or buy them, and all in all they are incredibly cost effective. And they are a decent compromise. Minis can help you imagine what an enemy looks like, so they are a decent help. Other than that, you can buy minis from eBay or Craigslist, but I've not had that much luck in that regard. Most of these are still very expensive and mostly focused on 40k. But that might also be because I live in Europe. The whole mini trading business seems much more prevalent in the US, with dedicated game shops and just in general things like that. Sadly, this is not something you can find here. Another decent way of getting minis are the Magic the Gathering board games. I've not played them and heard they are mediocre at best, but they offer a good chunk of plastic for very cheap, and when painted over, look decent enough. At least in my opinion. I mean, this is a goblin from the set, and sure, if I were to show it to you up close, you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's poor craftsmanship. But, I mean, for me, that thing is honestly a goblin. The next level would be the D&D board games. But with a price of 50 to 60 bucks, they are harder to justify. Even if they contain some high quality minis and some very interesting ones in particular. Similarly, you can also use Kickstarter to find some offers, and a lot of them have very good prices compared to the usual method of obtaining minis, because they use 3D printing. And that stuff is cheap. I don't have a 3D printer myself, but I've been eyeing the stuff for a little while. And in general, they are becoming very cheap. The budget ones with quality printing are reaching a $200 mark, and the material itself does not cost a lot. From what I've heard, a mini costs around 10 cents to print in material, not counting the printer maintenance and energy that the printer needs. But if that's true, then that's an insane price. Especially since the 3D printing community is awesome and they offer an abundance of things for free. Someone made the entire monster manual in free downloadable models that you can just use if you get a 3D printer. You can just straight up print every single mini that you will need, and even modify them if you have a little bit of experience with Blender. Some more exotic creatures might not be part of that collection, but you will most likely find something online, and that's insane. That part alone is incredibly tempting. I could just buy a 3D printer, pick a random creature from the monster manual, print it out and paint it. But I don't think a 3D printer right now is for me. $200 is still a hefty price for a hobby like this, and I've not found any 3D printing shops nearby, at least not any that are worth the price you'd pay there. But the technology is getting cheap very fast, and considering what you can do, $200 is honestly a fair price. But there's also one additional point I want to touch upon: painting minis. This is honestly the least important part, but also the most satisfying in my opinion. Preparing them, painting them, and then presenting them and seeing the reaction is magnificent. Again, you are completely fine running without proper minis or even unpainted minis, but painting them can make it easier to suspend disbelief and just imagine your character fighting this gigantic bear in a life-threatening combat. Just please don't paint the food, only the minis. Unless you use food coloring, but at that point, why not use minis? And I mean, this whole thing is incredibly cheap. You need a mini, or preferably multiple ones, every base color in acrylic, a bunch of brushes, and I also got glue. And you also need primer, which I don't have here, and my cat is on my lap, so I can't show it. But all in all, this stuff cost me $30, not counting the minis, because I had them before. And I mean, I've had a lot of fun already with that stuff. And again, this whole thing, like, these colors are gonna last me a long while. And I've already painted, and it's been fun. It's been nice, relaxing. And especially when I look at these two snakes, these snakes have a lot of detail and they were easy to do. You only needed two colors. You know, like I needed the green for the skin color and the red for the mouth. And then I used a little bit of white with the skin color to get the chest area. And it looks just magnificent for what it really took compared to this hastily primed one, which is not entirely primed, but it's fine. I mean, this is just insane. Especially because this mini does not look like it used two colors. I mean, technically 3 plus white, because it's blue and yellow to get the green, and then the red for the mouth, and then the white for the... But it looks much more complicated. Like, if you were to ask me what colors you required, I'd be like, yeah, okay, you need a green and a completely differently mixed green, but that's just straight up the same color, but with white, and it looks so different. And most importantly, with painting minis like that, I learn a lot. In a few years, once I meet my partner, I'll be able to tell them that I'm an artist and I paint things. And then they'll ask me what I paint. I'll tell them that I paint minis and realize that I'm an even worse nerd than I already have been up to this point. But I think that's fine.